Have you ever made an elaborate excuse to get out of something only to have it just backfire spectacularly?
Oh, I mean, who hasn't?
Right. You know the drill.
Yeah.
You want to skip a neighborhood gathering, so instead of just admitting you need a quiet night in, you invent this highly contagious, mysterious stomach bug.
A sudden plumbing disaster in the basement.
Exactly. A lost dog, the works, you think you're totally in the clear.
Until your neighbors show up at your front door with homemade chicken soup and a wrench.
Yeah, and a search party for the dog. We have absolutely all been there. But today's deep dive takes the art of the excuse to a whole new, surprisingly profound level.
It really does.
Before we jump in, though, I want to welcome you to this special deep dive produced for the Simplified Summary YouTube channel.
We're really excited about this one.
We tailor these deep dives specifically for you to take the reading you want to understand and really bring it to life. And since you're watching with us today, I humbly ask you to hit that subscribe button, drop a like on this video, and share your valuable thoughts in the comments section.
It really helps the channel grow.
It does, and we read every single comment to know what you want us to unpack next. So let's get into it. Our mission for today is a detailed summary and exploration of a classic story titled Aakhir Heela.
Which translates to The Last Excuse.
Right. It was written by the legendary Munshi Premchand, and it's part of his incredibly famous Mansarovar collection. Our goal today is to break down the plot, the characters, and the absolute comedic genius embedded in this piece.
And it is pure genius.
But, you know, for those who might only know Premchand's more serious work, how does this story fit into his broader legacy?
That is the essential context to start with, I think. When readers think of Munshi Premchand, they typically envision heavy, unflinching social realism.
Right. The intense poverty, complex caste struggles.
Exactly. The harsh realities of rural Indian society in the early 20th century. He was the voice of the marginalized. But Aakhir Heela reveals a completely different dimension of his talent.
It's so different.
It's this timeless, rather brilliant satire on domestic life, the institution of marriage, and specifically that psychological trap of over-explaining yourself.
Yes.
Premchand proves that while social structures might shift over time, human nature, especially our tendency to tie ourselves in knots to avoid an uncomfortable conversation with a spouse, remains remarkably consistent.
Okay, let's unpack this. We begin by meeting our narrator, and right in the opening paragraphs, Premchand gives us a crystal clear look into this man's mindset.
He really sets the stage.
He does. The narrator makes a point to tell us that he has completely forgotten all the grand, important historical dates of the world. The rises and falls of empires, the dates of monumental battles, they're just gone from like an immovable pillar, and that is his wedding date.
Of course it is.
He desperately tries to forget it, but the daily realities of his life simply will not allow him to.
It's a masterful opening because it immediately establishes the narrator's cynical yet, highly relatable perspective.
Very relatable for a lot of people.
He basically divides the concept of domesticity into two entirely different realities. On one side, you have the romanticized, poetic picture of marriage that society and literature sell to you.
The fairy tale.
Right. And on the other side, there is his lived reality, which is the exhausting, terrifying, and heart-rending daily grind of actually being a husband and a father.
And he paints such vivid pictures of that daily grind. There are these incredibly specific, gritty scenes he uses to describe the terrifying reality of fatherhood.
They're so good.
I want you, listening right now, to really picture the indignity this guy feels. He describes standing awkwardly at a neighborhood fuel or oil shop late in the evening, bone-tired, holding a squirming, crying child in his arms.
Or the scene with the flower.
Yes, where he's sneaking through the dark alleys of his own neighborhood with a bundle of flour tucked under his arm, looking nervously over his shoulder like a common thief. He is terrified of running into an acquaintance. What is driving that specific fear?
Well, it speaks volumes about the social anxieties of the educated middle class during Premchand's era. For a clerk or a professional man, performing manual domestic chores, like carrying bulk flour through the streets, was seen as a massive blow to one's public dignity.
It was embarrassing for him.
Exactly. Premchand uses these hyper-specific, slightly exaggerated slices of life to build the narrator's psychological foundation. The narrator feels entirely stripped of his autonomy and his respectability.
He just wants a break.
He views his family not through the lens of joy, but as a heavy, exhausting burden that demands endless sacrifices of his pride and his peace.
And the indignities just keep piling up. He talks about sitting on a broken chair at a homeopathic doctor's clinic at the crack of dawn, balancing sick kids on his lap.
The worst way to start a morning.
But the most revealing anecdote, and probably the funniest, is his reaction to the street vendors.
Oh, the toy vendors?
Yes. He describes the sheer, unadulterated panic a father feels when he hears a vendor approaching to sell toys. The moment the child's eyes go wide, the father suddenly has to transform into an ascetic philosopher.
It's brilliant.
He starts lecturing his toddler about the transience of worldly possessions and how material goods don't bring true happiness.
What's fascinating here is how Premchand captures the way we mask our mundane anxieties with grand philosophies. The father doesn't want to admit he either can't afford the toy or simply resents spending the few coins he has.
Right, he doesn't want to say, no, I'm broke, or no, I'm cheap.
So he elevates his stinginess into a spiritual lesson. It is hilarious,
Correct.
but it also underscores his core motivation, which is that he is desperate for an escape. He even mentions fathers who will hurriedly eat peanuts or sweets out on the street before reaching their front door.
Just to avoid sharing.
Just to avoid the inevitable attack of their children demanding a share. He craves isolation.
Which brings us to the central conflict of the plot. Our narrator has actually managed to secure that isolation.
He got out.
He did. He's currently living in the city, far away from his family, enjoying a sort of pseudo-bachelor freedom. He eats when he pleases, sleeps without interruption, and no one is asking him for toys.
Paradise for him.
But there is a looming threat. His wife, whom he respectfully but distantly refers to as Shramachiji, keeps writing him letters.
And she wants to visit.
She is increasingly insistent that she wants to pack up and come live with him in the city. So how does a rational person handle this versus how our narrator handles it?
Well, a rational person, recognizing their need for space or the practical limitations of their current living situation, would attempt an honest conversation.
Just be straightforward.
Right. They might write back and say, I need some time to myself right now. Or, the city accommodations aren't suitable for the family yet.
But our narrator lacks the courage for direct confrontation.
Completely. And instead of employing a simple no, he decides to weaponize his imagination.
I love that phrase, weaponize his imagination.
He constructs a series of terrifying fictions about city life, hoping to scare her so profoundly that she abandons the idea of ever visiting him.
He effectively decides to write dystopian fiction. Let's look at his first tactic. Excuse number 1, framing the city as Yamaraj's domain, the literal city of death.
It's so dramatic.
What exactly does he tell her in this first letter to scare her off?
He creates a masterpiece of catastrophic thinking. He writes back claiming that the city is an absolute lethal health hazard. He insists there is poison in literally everything she would consume. Poison in the food, the milk, the fruit, the water, and even the air.
Even the air is out to get them.
He adds that if the speeding motorcars don't run you over in the chaotic streets, the lethal mutated mosquitoes and giant flies will certainly finish you off.
Giant flies.
He goes so far as to claim that he walks around the city barely taking shallow breaths, absolutely terrified of catching tuberculosis from the contaminated air.
It is such an extreme escalation. You would think anyone reading that would say, all right, I am staying far away. But it backfires completely. How does his wife react to this apocalyptic description of his life?
This is where Premchand's understanding of human relationships really shines. Instead of being frightened away, the wife's maternal and spousal instincts kick into overdrive.
Oh, no.
She writes back stating that his terrifying description hasn't deterred her at all. In fact, it has drastically increased her anxiety for his safety.
Makes perfect sense.
She essentially tells him, if you are living in a literal death trap, I need to know you are okay. She demands that he write to her every single day to prove he is still alive.
Every single day.
And she threatens that if he misses a single letter, she will come straight to the city to check on him herself.
The exact opposite of what he wanted. He thought he had successfully dodged the bullet because she didn't immediately arrive, but now he's chained to his desk writing daily proof-of-life letters.
A hostage of his own making.
He realizes physical danger isn't going to deter her, so he pivots. This brings us to excuses number 2 and 3. If he can't scare her with disease, he decides to scare her with poverty and crime.
He shifts to financial danger, which in the context of domestic dynamics is often a much more effective deterrent than physical risk.
Right, hit them in the wallet.
He attempts to convince her that the city is crawling with financial leeches.
Right. He tells her he has to sneak into his own house like a cat just to avoid the creditors waiting at his door. He claims that if he receives his monthly salary at midnight, there are already half a dozen so-called friends sitting in his living room waiting to borrow money.
The dialogue he invents to prove his point is wonderfully dark.
Yes. He tells his wife about the excuses he makes to these freeloaders. He claims he tells them, I can't lend you money, my mother is sick, and what is the response he invents for them?
He claims they reply with absolute cold-blooded apathy, saying, well, old people take time to die.
That is so brutal.
It is a stunningly cynical projection. He is painting a picture of an urban society completely devoid of morals, empathy, or boundaries. He tells her of another instance where he pleads that he has to pay his rent, and the friend simply shrugs and advises him to skip it. Just skip rent. Sure. He wants his wife to believe that moving to the city would mean instant financial ruin.
But he doesn't stop there. He immediately stacks excuse number 3 on top of it, which is the Den of Thieves. He spins this wild tale of city crime, telling her that the crime rate is so astronomical people are forced to stand guard at their own front doors, wielding thick sticks and heavy tongs, just to keep the thieves at bay.
He is escalating the stakes with every piece of correspondence, desperate to find the specific fear that will finally break her resolve.
He even gives her 2 specific anecdotes as evidence. First, he tells her about a friend who was caught in the dead of night, actively gathering up all of the narrator's cooking utensils.
Just stealing his pots and pans.
Right, and when the narrator caught this man red-handed, the guy simply laughed it off and claimed he was just playing a friendly prank. Then, he tells her about another man who came over, asking to have a letter written. The narrator says he went upstairs for just a brief moment to grab a pen, and when he came back down, the man had vanished, taking the narrator's favorite fountain pen with him.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of the story, Premchand is doing something highly sophisticated with the epistolary format, the structure of telling a story through letters.
Because we never actually see her letters.
Exactly. We never actually hear the wife's voice directly during this exchange. We only see her through the narrator's panicked reactions. This contrasts the 2 characters brilliantly. On one hand, you have the narrator's cowardly avoidance. He will invent any lie, construct any elaborate societal collapse to avoid a direct, honest conversation.
And on the other hand,
You have the wife's unwavering resilience.
I was actually going to ask about that. Isn't it a bit of a stretch that she wouldn't see through these increasingly absurd lies?
That is the beauty of it. She likely does see through them, or at the very least, her commitment to her marriage supersedes the ridiculous horrors he is describing. Despite him detailing a hellish, crime-ridden, disease-infested, financially ruinous environment, her domestic intent remains unshaken.
She is not backing down.
The more he exaggerates, the more ridiculous his avoidance strategy appears to the reader, and the more resilient she seems by comparison.
She remains entirely unfazed by the toxic air, the callous leeches, and the utensil thieves. This absolute failure forces our narrator into a tight corner. He has exhausted all standard human fears. Which leads us to the climax of the story, the titular Aakhir Heela, or the last excuse.
The final attempt.
Running out of catastrophic ideas, what does he finally resort to complaining about?
It is the ultimate grasping at straws. Having failed with death, poverty, and crime, he writes a final desperate letter complaining about the absolute mind-shattering noise of the city. Specifically, he focuses on the demonic, unbearable mourning noises of the street vendors.
He claims their vocal exercises and shouting are worse than the noises made during the construction of the Tower of Kabul. That is a very specific reference. What does he mean by that?
In the literary and cultural imagination of the region at that time, referencing Kabul or ancient monumental constructions was a shorthand for unregulated, deafening chaos.
Got it.
Building a mythical tower there implies an immense, chaotic labor force, producing an earth-shattering cacophony. He is telling her that it is physically impossible to sleep, to think, or to maintain any semblance of peace because of this relentless auditory torture.
And this is where the tension finally snaps. 3 days after sending this final, desperate letter about the noisy street vendors, the narrator receives the shock of his life.
It all catches up to him.
He's sitting quietly in his supposedly chaotic city home, and suddenly, his wife arrives right at his front door. And she hasn't just come for a weekend visit. She has brought an old servant and all 3 of their children.
The whole entourage.
The narrator describes her planting herself in his house like an incurable disease. His meticulously guarded sanctuary has been completely breached.
The inevitable collision has occurred. The elaborate fiction he spent weeks building has finally crashed into reality.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The narrator is completely flustered. He is probably expecting her to walk in wearing a mask to avoid the tuberculosis, or clutching her jewelry to protect it from thieves.
Checking for giant flies.
Exactly. He stammers out a greeting, asking if everything is okay and why she decided to come so suddenly without warning. His wife calmly takes off her shawl, looks around the house with absolute simmering fury, and demands, "Is there a witch sitting in this house? If anyone steps in, I'll cut off their nose."
This raises an important question, which is really the central puzzle of the entire narrative. Why did she actually make the journey? And what does she mean by a witch and cutting off noses?
Exactly, because she didn't mention the noisy street vendors or the contaminated water at all.
The psychological punchline Premchand delivers here is exquisite. The husband firmly believed that his desperate, excessive, and increasingly absurd excuses were building an impenetrable wall to keep her out.
That was the plan.
But in reality, those excuses did not frighten her in the slightest. They made her deeply, profoundly suspicious. She is a pragmatic woman. She processed all of these wild, hysterical letters and arrived at the most logical conclusion a spouse could reach in that specific scenario.
Which was what?
She assumed that the only possible reason a man would try this hard and lies this incredibly elaborate to keep his wife away from his home is if he was hiding another woman inside it.
Oh, that is brilliant. The witch she is threatening to cut the nose off of, which is a classic cultural idiom for inflicting public humiliation, is the imaginary mistress she assumes he is hiding.
Precisely. The narrator is hit with a moment of crushing clarity. His own elaborate lies, his absolute masterpiece of excuses, were essentially a trap he built for himself.
He played himself.
By expending massive amounts of energy to avoid the minor, everyday discomforts of living with his family, he accidentally convinced his wife that he was having an affair. This triggered the exact outcome he had been working so hard to prevent, her immediate, unannounced, and permanent arrival to reclaim her territory.
So what does this all mean for us today? The story is a brilliant comedy, but the reason it resonates so deeply is because it holds up a mirror to our own behavior.
The big takeaway here is a profound piece of human psychology. Over-justification is the ultimate sign of guilt. Premchand brilliantly captures how human beings consistently outsmart themselves when they try to avoid the simple, unvarnished truth.
We really do.
When we pile excuse upon excuse, we do not appear innocent or victimized. We look like we are hiding something significantly worse than the reality. A simple letter stating, "I am enjoying living alone for a while and need some space," would have undoubtedly caused a difficult argument.
Sure, she wouldn't have loved it.
But it would not have resulted in a furious spouse showing up at the door ready to wage war on an imaginary mistress.
It is remarkably true. I want you, listening right now, to reflect on your own life for a moment. Think about the last time you over-explained yourself. Maybe it was to a manager at work, a close friend, or your partner. You gave 5 distinct, elaborate reasons why you were late to an event, instead of just offering a sincere apology.
And by the end of it,
By the time you finished spinning that web, you ended up looking totally guilty of something much worse, didn't you? We construct these incredibly tangled webs to protect ourselves, and we are almost always the ones who end up caught in them.
we frequently expend vastly more energy maintaining the illusion that it would take to simply confront and deal with the reality.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought to mull over as we wrap up today's deep dive. If we spent half as much energy actually facing our realities, having the uncomfortable conversations, and setting honest boundaries as we do inventing elaborate excuses to escape them, how much simpler would our lives actually be? What is the Aakhir Heela, the last excuse that you are telling yourself right now to avoid a truth you desperately need to face?
That is a challenging but necessary question to reflect on.
It really is. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the genius of Munshi Premchand. We absolutely love unpacking these literary treasures and finding the timeless lessons hidden within them. Before we go, just one last humble reminder. If you enjoyed this journey through Aakhir Heela, please make sure to subscribe to the Simplified Summary YouTube channel.
Drop a like on this video to support the content.
And please share your valuable comments below. Did you ever have a perfectly crafted excuse backfire on you like our narrator? We want to hear your stories. Until next time, keep reading and keep questioning the stories you tell yourself.